Yeah, I think so.
Okay, let's go ahead and call this board workshop together at 2:05. Let the record show that Carol, Bob, and Ed are here. The other two are on their way, be here in about 10 minutes. We can go on ahead and get started on some of these workshop discussion or budget discussion items. Do you want to start, Laura, giving us anything on updates that I know we got?
Yes, and Stephen, feel free to chime in anytime with this. Stephen and I spent quite a bit of time together today, this morning, looking over the budget and trying to find ways to reduce, because there was definitely sticker shock when we got to the assessment portion of it. And between a sheet that Chelsea put together and Stephen and I going through the budget and looking at the various carry forwards that were available, quite a bit of interest that we've earned in those budget accounts, as well as some bonds that we were able to shift around from other projects that we know we're not going to get to. We were able to offset the entire cost of the construction of the admin building and the park for Pelican, Enterprise Fund, and the general fund. So they'll.
Enterprise Fund, if you recall, a year ago, we took out a loan because we knew we had a shortfall.
Yes.
Each fund had a shortfall. And so a year ago, Pelican had said they were given the option, either take it from reserves or assess it. PPAC at the time said, we're gonna take it from reserves. The general fund, last year, we had moved some money around between bonds and interest earnings. So after re-verifying it again, Laura and Stephen, other than the enterprise fund, which we had that short-term loan, we took out 1.8 million. Between interest earnings and carry forward, nothing has to be assessed this year for the admin building and the park stuff. There are no additional costs that we anticipate.
But the enterprise stuff is remote from this.
Correct.
Correct.
We're just talking 001 and 002.
Yes, things that'll show up on the tax bill.
Okay, so you gave me those numbers. What is the total dollar value? I came up with about 3.5, 3.6 million.
Give me a second, I had a computer failure here and I had to restart it. It's telling me I don't have.
For what?
internet.
What are you asking?
What is the total amount of, I went through what I thought was the capital that was not amortized, that was subject to this, which included the park, included the overrun on the building, and a couple of other things. I came up with about 3.6 million. Is that the same number you're coming up with?
I'm not sure what you're asking.
Okay.
In other words, you're using this interest to offset the capital. How much is the total we're offsetting?
I
Is it-
can't get to it right now, so I just want to
You
share
just
with this,
list
but I don't
each
have
one of
internet to share. This does not have access to it, they're restricted. So
That's
give me a
what I want
minute
to do is
and-
mark it on my sheets here where that's at. I want to say 3.5, 3.6 million.
Let me, all right, here we go, I'm back. It told me.
So how does that change things for the assessment?
So-
If we go to page 3 of the budget, the fiscal year 26 budget,
Page 3 or page 117. There's two different.
Look at version 2.
I'm looking at the amended version. If you click on budget discussion, that second one.
But I'm saying the one with the loans or the one with the
No.
bonds or the other.
The ones without the bonds in it.
Okay.
Okay.
So that's
If we
page
just-
117, I think.
Okay, or page 3 of the discussion item on the workshop. But anyway, if you go to the one
Chelsea?
where it says
Can you
what the
pull that up,
levy
Laura?
is going to be.
Yeah, I just, yeah.
It's the spreadsheet that shows the rate calculation.
Correct.
I think it's page 117.
How does what you just said
There it is.
change that?
Okay, so what'll happen with this, I guess it's probably gonna be easier to show on this one. This 36.4% increase that we have here for Gateway, and then the 38 for the multifamily, that reduces dramatically. I'm just waiting to get to my sheet here.
Okay.
Well, aren't you saying that what we're dealing with is the fourth column. It's entitled General Funds 001 and
This-
002.
yeah, this right
Those are
here.
the numbers that are being impacted by this,
Correct. Which, when you get to the end,
which we need to see a revised sheet of this.
yep. All right, hang on, I can do it. Sorry, guys.
Note that Flogger Walsh arrived at 2:11 PM.
Starbucks in hand.
That's a joke.
It couldn't be something else, you know, the glass, we can have the door closed though.
You can open, Joe.
Thank you. So what we're talking about is going over the fact that the spreadsheet that showed the calculation of the assessment, we've come up with X number of millions of dollars that defers the need to have a capital issue this year, which, by my calculations, reduced this deal somewhere around $350. I don't know what the computer said, but my math said around 350, which drops that 15, what happened to it? That 1555 calculation. What the hell did you do?
Hang on,
Move sheets on here.
let's do this. That's
Yeah,
not-
it takes that 1558, that's the number we're talking about, this 1273, the 1163, all of those drop by whatever the share is to a lower number. That's what we're looking for. And then that added to the two pond bank deals and bonds shows that green line of the total assessment, which is now at 1870, which we're not gonna do.
So ultimately, with this admin building, so for Pelican, PPAC said and the board said, use their reserves. Then this year, they said, hey, we want to assess. What we're telling you is between the interest earnings that you've accrued, there's no need to assess.
Well, wait a minute, but that's a decision for them.
Well, you and PPAC, which that will be, we'll tell them next week.
But the amount of money from Pelican that we were going to pull from reserves in the 25 year was 265. And now that has grown to 493. $493,637, correct? That's a question.
It's here on the sheet.
That's what it said on the sheets. So, okay, so my comment would be, and I'm not going to speak for PPAC, but if they choose to take it out of their reserves, no harm, no foul. But if they choose to leave it in the assessment, if they choose to pay for it in the assessment, again, no harm, no foul. That's their choice.
Right.
Because what they're trying to do, I believe, is to make sure that the residents fully understand the impact of the admin building, the park, and all the other changes we made. If they take it out of reserves, it kind of hides that a little bit.
Understood.
Okay. I want to say that as much for my fellow board members. Is there anything
Yeah, I
else?
understand what you're saying. So you cranked the number yet?
This is, so this is the sheet that I was talking about that Stephen and I worked through. This was Chelsea started this, and then we went through and checked and refined and did whatever. So I tried to color code the things that go together. So the green was our original budget that we had when we did the bond issuance, the 3.62. And then if you look down here, the green, these three numbers add up to that. So the green ones go together. And then after all of these changes and everything in here, this was the new number for the admin building. So this blue number, these three numbers add up to that blue number. Then if you see down here, they're the same. This number and this number are the same.
So the cost of that, if I'm reading this right, the current cost is 6.8 million?
And
Well,
this,
Bob, our issue is not so much what the current cost is, it's what we had budgeted and what we were short. We were going to have it as either a capital outlay or a bond or cash. And what they have done is come up with cash. And my question is just, when we're all said and done, all of these things that we were short on, that were capital outlay, what's the total of them? So how much cash do we have to have? And then better yet, where did it come from that wasn't here 2 weeks ago? Because I can't picture, and then Stephen can answer for himself. I just understand, why did we go through this and piss off 5,000 residents with a scare tactic of an $1,800 deal when it didn't need to happen?
Timing, truth be told, it's timing.
That 3 million didn't come up
No.
overnight.
No, it
Why
didn't,
didn't we use it before?
didn't have enough time to put it together. So between the new assessment methodology, working with Russ and Steven,
Okay, but where did that money, where was it at, or where did it come from that we're using it?
It's, the money from the interest is actually, so each of the bonds has a fund, they're 307, 308, 309.
So it's money that the bonds earn.
It's interest earnings on the bond fund. So
Okay,
we're
we
using
don't have-
money from the bonds, the bonds are generating more revenue by having interest. And that's where all of this interest earnings is coming from the
But
bonds.
the bonds don't have any escrow requirement or retainage requirements? We don't have any of that.
No,
So every penny, Steve, go ahead.
One other question would be, Stephen,
Michael,
Stephen, do you need to do an arbitrage calculation to make sure it's okay?
There will be an arbitrage calculation done on all of those bond accounts for every bond.
So we don't know if there will be any obligation after the arbitrage calculation.
That's correct. I mean, that's usually it's done on a 5-year term, meaning that you do it, and you wouldn't remit that. Even if we were to calculate it today and determine there's, $1,000 due, you wouldn't remit it until after 5 years. So the next 2, 3, 4, and 5 could have, an opposite arbitrage. So
Okay.
that's not something that we would retain right now.
Okay, thank you.
and we did confirm with Pedro when we started discussing this, that any interest earned for this can be used for those capital projects identified in the bond.
Okay,
So how did Pelican get $440,000? Is this interest earned for their laddered investments, or is this just something?
Between, correct me if I'm wrong, the bond, Stephen Bloom was smart with your guys' financing and investments, and so we have the interest earnings from the bond.
So that's our capital reserves earnings.
Stephen, can you confirm that?
It's a kind of both. So your bonds are absolutely,
Way too much.
sorry.
All right, I'm asking.
go ahead, Steve.
yeah, I was about to say the bond money is absolutely earning interest just like anything else, as well as Chelsea mentioned, we do quite a bit of investing and CD ladders for Pelican Preserve. And
I understand all that, Stephen. My question is, that what you just referred to as bond earning, that is actually the earnings of our capital reserves, correct?
some of it would be, but some of it is directly on the money that's the proceeds from the 2023 bond. While it's sitting there, it is earning interest. And while the market rates are good, it's earning, some really good interest. So that's part of the number.
The amount of, just bear with me as I walk my brain through it. The amount of money in the 2023 bond that is attributable to Pelican, really kind of minor compared to the total.
That's
How
correct.
do you get so much money?
But keep in mind, yes, well, two pieces to that. The first piece is that money is in a separate trust account assigned to Pelican. So it's very simple and to look at that money and be able to pinpoint it. I mean, and again, it will not be used for anything else. So it is a no-brainer to put it towards this. The second part of your question is, yeah, the bulk of this is because of the CDs, because
Okay, I personally would like to see that separated. I don't want to see these mixed in with this at all. Keep that separate, because that's a totally separate issue. Any earnings we're getting that's associated with 2013 bond, that's fair game for this.
Okay, so
So I'm going on from a different point of view. If we have about a $2.5 to $3 million overrun on the building. Why would we want to use interest earnings to debt finance that should be amortized?
That's true too.
That makes no
Put it over
sense.
20 years.
Why do I want to pay for it when the guy that moves in tomorrow gets it for free? That doesn't make sense. The building has got a life of at least 20, 30 years.
I'm with you all the
So
way.
why would I want to take interest that I've earned and generate that to offset debt?
It'd be 1 year offset. It's kind of
Yeah.
hiding the weeds. Let's get the real cost of what
Let's
they
get the
are.
real cost. If we've got $2.5 million or whatever the number is, just take and borrow the money and we get that building, whatever the building is, less what down payment we had to have for the bond, then we borrow the rest for 20, 25, 30 years, whatever we can get. That way, the people that pay for it, that come here 10 years from now are paying for it. Otherwise, they come in, they get it for free. That's not fair.
Because to look at this and see Gateway's going to get 10 grand and Pelican's 440, that's way out of proportion.
It just, we're going way too fast, way too fast. We're not taking all into consideration all the scenarios. We got caught with our pants down because we underestimated a whole bunch of stuff. Now, the good news is we got this money. The thing is let's just don't spend it like drunk sailors.
Correct.
Let's invest it the way we should. And Steve, you're our guy on that. You should be telling us, I would think, would have told us or told staff that, hey, don't put it on that, borrow the money and use that as a first annual payment of the P&I.
So Ed, to your point, I don't disagree with anything you're saying. I think for the exercise for today, what we were trying to do is show that those assessments, as part of the bigger discussion, could be lowered, for the high water mark. None of that means we necessarily have to follow every one of these, the roadmap you have here. It's just showing you an example. I don't disagree with you. That's a larger discussion in terms of we've talked about it internally a little bit, but we haven't, reached out to any banks to look at the differential, how much you earn in interest, how much you then pay, your P&I payments, that type of stuff. But that does not have to be, resolved today. But I don't disagree that we could do that.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with the high water mark. I just don't want it to be a flood.
Well,
We've
the other question I
never
had,
done this kind of a number before.
the other question I had is when I was digging a little into the numbers, I was under the impression that we kind of looked at our capital spending program in the future, and for 26, this reflects fully implemented. No, it's putting 100% of what we are thinking of for future capital. That's not part of this? I don't know where I got that from.
That's, okay. I was of the understanding that what we talked about at the last meeting was that if we're looking at $4 million a year for 5 years for capital in the 5-year period, 20 million bucks. That 4 million, how much of that were we going to discuss that we wanted to put aside on the deal? As I recall, the number was 20%, correct?
For this year, for 26?
For 26, yeah.
20%.
So in other words, we're saying we're kicking the can down the road for 80%, we're
Right,
funding
right.
20. That gives us the option to do that the next year, next year, next year. If you take that scenario and let's just say arbitrarily that it's $20 million over 5 years, 4 million per year. 4 million a year at somewhere in the neighborhood of 6% for principal and interest payment, about $240,000. And if you're going to do 20% of that, that would be $48,000. Okay?
Does this number cover the full 4 million?
That's where I'm headed. That's where I'm headed. Of that 20 million that we had identified, and that number could be up or down. I thought that's what I read in the report. 20 million for the next 5 years. Are we addressing any reservation of funds for it in this proposal?
Not in this right here, no, but it is in the budget. This sheet that we're looking at here, right here, only addresses the admin building and the park.
Okay, where's the other items that make up that figure? Where are they at? And how are they being reserved? Because if you take out the park and you take out the building, you took out a big chunk of the 20
Yeah,
million.
the overwhelming majority.
They
Well,
are split up.
And forget about enterprise, I'm not talking about, I don't think
No,
we're
no,
talking
no,
about
no,
enterprise.
no, no, that's-
Enterprise totally separate.
He asked where they are.
Thanks, Johnny.
So we didn't have any for landscape coming up. There was nothing on the capital sheet specifically for landscaping.
Well,
Under
look at it
waterway
this way.
management,
Go to your capital sheet. On the capital sheet for the next 5 years, it's showing on here. Highlight the items that make up the component that was the 20 million?
It's everything from 27 to, I don't think I put it in here. This is the summary.
I'm just trying, there's no totals on this, this makes it difficult. I'm just trying to, is 20 the correct number we're dealing with, or is that a figment of my imagination? But I remember seeing something
It
that
is
was 20 million.
20%. So what it is I took the total of all of the projects, the sheet doesn't have a summary.
Don't do utilities.
From 27,
Yeah, don't do utilities.
okay, it doesn't matter, it's the same problem. From 27 through 31, so not counting next year, but the 5 years after that, I added up all of the projects that are in here that are not bonds, so anything that was capital. We pulled up a different sheet that actually shows that on there. And I divided it by 5, and that's because that's what you said you want to do with the
Well,
20%.
that's, we said 5 years.
Yeah, so that's what I did. I just took the total of all of the capital projects from fiscal 27 through fiscal 31, added them up, and then divided it by 5. And that was
What's
the
that come out to
20%.
be?
Let her pull up that sheet.
But that's future, that doesn't 2026.
But see, what some of the issues are, and that Laura and I had a discussion about this, is like vehicles. Those are not, correct me if I'm wrong, but those are not in here. Those vehicles, just like you and I, we go to a deal, we buy a car, when we find debt finance it 5 years. It's going to be used for 5 years. Now, if you're going to go out and trade the thing every other year, that might not be a real wise decision. But we don't do that. All of our equipment, as far as I'm concerned, everything that's on that list that has a service life of over 3 to 5 years should be amortized. Why would we want to pay cash for it up front?
So
I mean, it doesn't make sense.
And all the vehicles are 8 years.
Well,
Could be, yeah.
we did that last year. You guys said you didn't want to do that. So we took an F-150. It was $50,000. We said it had an 8-year life. We divided that by 50,000 by the 8 years. So you put a little bit aside each year. And that's how we got what our totals were going to be. Last year, you said you did not like that method because it was a big number.
But last year, we didn't know we were $4 million short on 2 projects. That's the difference.
Okay, so here.
It doesn't
So for
make any difference to me.
example-
I'm just trying to figure out what is our strategy of going ahead. I cannot see on capital expenses, especially those that vehicles are argumentative, but everything else that has a service life, why do we want to pay cash up front? And let the people that come here into the community over the next 10 years get it for free? That's not fair.
So here's where I got my calculations from. This is the Public Works capital project sheet, which is in your board book. I just blew it up. So this particular table is not included in your stuff, but it's on the individual tab. So for example, for roads, this total here is, I took the average of these projects right here. So it's divided by 5, so it's 20%. So then for roads, it would be $172,100.
Per year.
Per year for the next 5 years to
Okay,
cover all these
that
projects.
makes sense.
And then this one, same thing, 12,200. I did the same thing for Parks and Rec. Theirs actually came out to be 175. Or no, they're
So-
here.
All of them added. That's the question. What are all of the 001 and 002 items added that cover our capital costs for the next 5 years? If we say it's 10 million, 20 million, whatever the number is, divide it by 5. If we make the decision, we're going to pay 20% of it. What is 20%? Is it 170,000?
Well, I don't know that applies for O2. They're kind of, they can,
Well, it's
they can
a
make that
percentage,
decision.
yeah.
But keep them separate for this discussion.
Okay.
Look at O1, look at O2.
But the issue is, what is the number we're dealing with? Because that's, if we've got that covered in here, very possibly, if we would do debt retirement and amortize those big ticket items, we would have enough of that interest left over to help offset that the next 4 years instead of having to raise rates for assessment. That's what I would like to do. I would like to be able to, if we, knowing now that we have that cash available, how can we best use that instead of having sticker shock like we got this year with everybody when jumping from $1,100 to $1,800?
The total that you guys have in reserve in this budget in the 001 is $551,000.
Per year?
Well, if you keep the same for the, well, it'll change because we look forward 5 years each year. So for right now, yes, that would be this fiscal 26 is 20% of the next 5 years.
And
And just
that's the 551,000.
Yes.
Okay.
It's broken up across three areas.
So if you took that,
So this is a specific line item for reserves.
Yes, it's right,
It's not money that you just
Nope,
didn't
it's right
spend
here.
or whatever.
nope, it's right here, capital project reserves.
what would be 3 items? One would be admin, one would be.
And
Parks
there,
Rec,
yeah, this
would
one is
be-
under Public Works, and then
Waterway.
there's one under Waterway. Waterway is here, and then, Parks and Rec is here.
So
So
the participants in paying for it pay based upon what silo it's coming out of.
that's why I broke it out that way instead of doing it like we did before, just the general capital projects reserve. We did like Pelican has, and under each of the categories, there is a capital reserve line for
So
each of them.
the 551 is the combination of the three areas.
Correct.
So would 551 be accurate for 2026? Or would it be more like 750?
I don't understand.
If we take this interest money that's available and we amortize, for example, the building of the park, which means we're not having to come up with 3 million in cash. Now, all we do is got to come up with the amortized amount for a year, which is what, Bob, you said about 200,000, 250, something like that. That means we still got one chunk of interest left over. How far does that interest go out in paying to avoid assessments?
Of the
Future,
of what we would have on hand
yes.
from the earnings.
If
So we
don't
basically take
spend-
that earnings
But-
and
If we don't spend,
amortize,
But as we spend, the
amortize
earnings
that
gonna
against the
decline.
amortization
correct.
of the assets.
Yeah, in other words,
So
use
to
that,
cancel those out.
use that to offset the
But as we're spending
amortizing
it down,
amount.
the amount drops.
Do what now?
Right, I mean, it would be a little more
As we're-
complex calculation.
Yeah, as we're moving to the future, the amount that we're earning keeps depleting.
Yeah.
Well, that depends upon your capital reserve study. If your capital reserve study is 4 million every year, it's
Well, then,
complete.
then you're okay.
You would hope that we start leveling that thing off after 5 years, but we need to look at that. But we pretty well said at the last meeting, and I totally agree with it. Let's don't look beyond 5 years. I think we're making a mistake. You're really guessing when you start to go beyond that. But we should be able to get this down pretty tight on 5 years. And if we've got this kind of interest money available, let's use it to, for the next 5 years, help offset any increase that would have been necessary to pay for capital.
And just to be clear, the replacement life cycle of a particular asset could be longer than 5 years. We document that inventory and what that life cycle is.
Yeah.
However, we were only projecting out 5 years to repair, replace that.
But-
And just so we're clear, one quick second.
That's all right.
And just so we're clear, what the methodology proposal is we go through those assets, we amortize over 5 years. We use the revenue generated from the bonds or the whatever,
Interest.
and we offset that amortization through that revenue funding. So basically, we're
Exactly.
we're running a kind of zero.
Yeah, but the one facet we're not looking at here is that we have other capital plans for each of those next 5 years too. Like this year, we're looking at, what, $750,000 for the amphitheater.
But that
So that's-
should have, all should be in here.
Well,
That should all be in here. But to go back to it, keep in mind, this is only 20%.
Right.
Each year of those next
Right.
5 years.
There's gonna
we
be
still gotta
impacts
come
to
up
us
with-
that-
We
yeah.
still gotta have an impact of the other 80%.
Yeah, and if we look at it, there's things that are funded year over year. What we, I think I'll try to do is figure out what is that reasonable number that we feel is the assessment. And as a project falls off, new ones will come on, but we don't want to go above, whatever the percentage benchmark is for us. Let's say 30 or 40% would be, okay, that's ridiculous. We try to stay within either single or low double digits whenever possible. Zero would be optimal, but, it's really difficult in today's environment. But this is where we have to be really acute in what we're doing, is making sure that we are, like we do, go through the prioritization, go through the list, because we may have to get,
Well, knowing
get
that.
the pencil out with the eraser and start cutting back in some areas.
Knowing that that interest is there and it is fixed and not encumbered any other way is a big step. We get past that.
It's only encumbered to the extent that the interest has to follow the principal. I think that's what
So
Steve
the more
said.
you draw upon principal, the less interest you get.
But, yeah, and again, if the principal is in there because it's bond proceeds for a building, then it has to follow that particular use, generally.
Steve, is there anything wrong with this or anything that is erroneous about this concept?
He's muted.
And I do have one more question. So we've got earned income from from the bonds, and that's for this year. We will continue to have that year over year.
Well, less as
And
you
we-
draw.
Till you start drawing it down.
Exactly, but what I mean is, the good news is we would treat this as, this revenue source will fund amortization of these other items for the next 5 years. Next year,
The,
Reevaluate.
the interest earned from, it's my understanding, and I could be wrong, but the interest earned from the bond proceeds have to be spent back on those projects.
That gets back to the interest follows the principal.
Yes,
It
so
can't be
you
used
can't
for-
you can't earn $900,000 off the 2023 bond series and go build an amphitheater at the fun park. You can't use that money.
But you
It
It has
went
to
through.
stay within.
But you can take that money and tie it to the principal and interest.
Which is the idea.
Of what you've already.
within that
borrowed.
bond GL or whatever, and I think that's where,
Use
yeah,
that as your payment
Well,
for the next.
Well, the
couple
fact that
of
we've got
years.
that building and that park that are basically the tail wagging the dog, there is our sink for the money to have compliance.
As
So I don't
long
think
as we
we've got
keep
that
the
big.
funds separate, O1, O2, general.
But you do have to watch, if you, like Chelsea said, if you start introducing new things, then you're
So
not gonna be able to do
here's
that.
the issue. So, oh, I'm sorry, Carol, go ahead. I know you had a question.
So how did the things change from what we had in that, in the very first thing of the 1,500 for Gateway, and how did these numbers change that?
Because what we showed here is the use of you didn't have to assess the shortfall. We have carry forward and interest earnings, cash flow basically, to address the shortfall. And that's how it went down drastically.
and so what we're saying now is, it's more financially
Okay.
responsible for us to not take that, which was the original plan, pull things, amortize, and then use that source to fund.
Right. So how does that change the numbers?
So that's what I wanted to mention is if you're looking to do a 20-year term on this, we'd have to go back and look at the master trust indenture, because that number, we'd have to look at the administrative category to see if we could do another bond series to take out the shortfall that we're talking about here within that line item. And I don't have that off the top of my head. I don't know that we,
Who makes that call? Is that a Russ deal or is that a Steve
We
deal?
work with Pedro on that. And again, anything with a maturity of more than 5 years, you have to have it be validated or part of the validation process. So to the extent that it's already in there, and we can,
So
that becomes a question.
that would mean a new bond series, not only for Pelican, but also for the district, which would incur bond counsel. We'd have to go through the public hearing process for the supplemental
timeframe.
trust. We'd have to have an engineer draft an engineer's report.
We have said, Chelsea, for several times, that when we had that overrun, we didn't know this yesterday. We've known this for over a year. We knew we had the overrun. It was my understanding that that was going to be borrowed. This is the first, it sounds like, that we never thought about that we were just gonna pay cash for it. Where did that idea come from?
I wasn't clear that we were borrowing the difference.
Well, I think from what I remember is,
Well, then
how we got
were
there
looking-
is,
then you were looking
there
at
is a,
having a sticker shock then.
No,
You knew it was gonna happen.
no, we had, I knew months ago we had interest earnings that we were gonna be able to use.
and carryover, and.
We had all the projects that we didn't do for the park stuff that you guys voted on a year ago. the splash pad and things like that, that we knew we had carried forward that was gonna be earmarked for this.
I mean, to me, how we even got to the point where we felt like these improvements were feasible is through the various funding sources. And the carryover and some of the other areas, we're like, okay, we can self-fund this through these areas. Now we're at a point where we have real numbers, we have alternative solutions, and maybe borrowing was a possibility, but we had the potential cash on hand.
It's still a
So,
possibility.
yeah, so now we're just looking at, here's an alternative, which might make more sense if you are to amortize, because it floats that debt across a longer period, which impacts, the residents and assessments maybe in a more favorable light, which makes sense. So now it's just, there's an alternate solution. We need to vet that out and see what that looks
How
like.
many
Ed,
interest,
are you looking to do this alternate solution before we put out the high water mark?
I would like to, because I don't know about your phones over there, but my phone rang off the hook the last 3 days. I thought I was gonna have to get a guard at the house, keep it.
It happens every year. It doesn't matter what the number
No
is.
one called.
It doesn't matter what the number is. If it's not
Thank you for
zero,
asking.
your phones are gonna ring off the hook. That's just the way it goes.
I was-
No, I'm just saying, if we follow the approach that you're outlining, is it your intention that be the high water mark and not what we have presented to us today?
As I understand it, Stephen can crunch this number to let us know going this alternative, what the ramifications, and keep in mind, we're only dealing with one number and one number only. That's that $1,558 number. 1,558 is the number that's gonna drop.
Well,
The
I
rest
thought
of it's
it
bond.
affected Pelican also.
Oh, it's gonna carry through, but
to a
it's
much lesser
it's
extent.
not a much lesser deal than ours.
Right.
Yes, to answer your question, I'd like to see at least what is the number that is right now at 1,800 that would be a high water mark if we would take this option. Is it 1,200? Is it 1,300? That's issue one. Then the second issue that I'm getting hit by from people in my community is that take away the reserve. Take away the reserve issue. The 20%, 50%, whatever the number is. Take away the reserve so that this is flying basically apples to apples from last year. What was the increase? You were $1,100 last year, $1,190.38 to be exact. What was it without the reserve going to be this year?
And what's the purpose in that?
Just
They wanna know,
FYI,
well, typically, we've been running 6, 8, 10%. We know we've had some things that came into play. We had the operation and maintenance costs associated with both the building and the park, but we only put partial in. I think it's about $150,000.
Yes.
So what would have created a need that the change would have been more
But
than?
you're still talking about, we will still fund the reserve.
yeah, so you have to put it in there, because you can just put it FYI, like
I mean,
on top, like.
Instead of
it's funny.
reserving
You
100%, you just
What we're trying to
No,
do,
he wants to
Doug,
he wants to remove it altogether.
Well, just
but
for
then
the
it wouldn't
number.
be- But then it wouldn't be, but you can't send that out, and your high water mark wouldn't be, it wouldn't be, the high water
I'm
mark
with you,
is
I'm with you.
required that.
I'm
So
with
it
you,
can be
but-
an FYI, like explaining them, this would be, in addition, the increase is gonna be only 9%. However, this time
We're adding
we're adding
reserves.
reserves, so then there's an increase a little bit more.
Thank
But
you.
I think it's an explanation that we need, but I don't think we send it out without it, because statute wouldn't allow us to, because then how our mark later on would
Yeah.
be more, because we have to add reserves.
Because it's basically, here's what the dinner costs. Okay, great. Here's, when the bill comes, here's all
Yeah.
the service fees, and it wasn't $12, it was
Exactly.
$20.
what do they call it at the club? Plus, plus.
Yeah, plus.
Plus, plus.
So I think the explanation, one second, I think the explanation would be good, so you can see what is our actual operating, year over year, and the philosophy around the reserve, baking that in, because that benefits the community just over time, and should stop larger hits from occurring down the road.
And that is the key. That is exactly what it's doing. It's
Well,
stopping the
I-
larger hits down
I'm
the road.
completely supportive of this, but I want to make sure that when we regenerate the numbers that we looked at earlier, that we differentiate between
Bond,
O1, O2,
Yeah.
and enterprise,
Reasonable.
and whether we're talking bond income versus capital reserve income. That we
Completely understand.
identify all of it.
Well, Bob, the one thing you could look at right now is that
You're saying if you earned interest on the reserves, reserves you already have in the bank.
Right.
You want that interest to stay in those
Well, I
reserves.
want feedback to opine on that, but yes, I think that's what
But if
the
you earned interest on
bond,
money that you didn't spend or bond interest or
then
whatever,
I don't care.
then that, in your opinion,
Yeah.
that could be used
Yes.
to offset that.
Exactly.
Okay. I just want to
Yeah, I just
understand.
want to make sure we
So I think-
differentiate.
So I think the issue is that can Stephen, between now and the time we have our meeting where we put this out for everybody, can we recalculate that's in that green column? What the number would be if we make the assumption that we're going to debt finance, amortize those overrun costs on the.
Through a bond.
On the
That
bond,
I agree.
yes. And then know what that hit is, and at this point in time, do it with and without the 20% reserve calculation of bottle. I think you came up with what, 200,000 ballpark, somewhere in that number. Throw that in then on top to see what that impact is. My calculation said it was somewhere in the neighborhood of $40 to $60 additional. I want to know if that's correct. If it is, that's not a big ticket item. $200 or $300 is a big ticket item.
And I
So
still
Stephen
don't
can
have-
run that calculation, then if we go to
And how
our,
long will it take him to do that?
should be able to do it immediately.
So, a couple things. Because you've asked a lot. Let me just summarize this real quick. So it's your intent to use instead of using the interest earnings to pay for the project, you want to use that money to pay for P&I payments moving forward.
As
As far
an
as you
alternate
can,
solution.
as far as you can stretch it,
Yes,
correct?
yes.
Correct. Now, there's a shortfall of the admin building in the park. 14% Pelican, 59% enterprise fund, 27% general fund. If that is not, I know it's not in the Pelican bond because we only borrowed the minimum, and I guarantee we did the same.
We didn't borrow anything.
For enterprise.
I guarantee we did the same for the general fund. So that means there is not an opportunity through the bond validation to take this money out. We could do a 5-year, unless we can change the master trust indenture, which I'm not privy to.
Well, you'd have to try to get a supplemental trust indenture. And the question is for Pedro whether or not we need any bondholder consent to modify it.
But to modify it to increase the dollar amount for the administrative
No.
category,
I don't believe so.
yeah.
I'll
that's-
get back.
that's
We
the problem.
validated a not to exceed number,
Correct,
and I can't remember what that not to exceed number is.
within each category.
Well, no, just overall, we validated a number for the project. It was X dollars. I don't
But you
think
were
that,
asking if you can move them around as long as the total.
but I'm not
doesn't
sure if the
Yeah.
bond series that
I
was
don't think
issued
so.
was
I
the
think
entire
we
amount
asked
that was
about it before,
validated.
and
I need to check the validation judgment and try to do that because you can validate up here and then only borrow down here. I think that's what happened.
We know we can do at least a 5-year loan on the shortfall, on the Pelican side and on the Gateway side.
Here's what I think to simplify things. We have this concept. Staff go vet out what the solution path is gonna look like. 'Cause we can sit up here and, we're not all experts in this area. So I think that what is clear is we want to look at amortizing and then also paying through revenue sources, alternative to just a full spin of rollover and some of the other things. So go re-solution that and come back, and it could be X, Y, and Z, bond this or 5-year this, whatever, but I think you understand what our
The intent,
philosophy
yes.
is.
So what I was gonna suggest at the end of the regular session was to continue that meeting to a time and date certain next
Excuse me.
week. That way, that way we could
Bless
iron
you.
out some of, any of the comments that came up from today. We don't have to have it approved, we have to have it approved 60 days prior to it.
We need to have, again, the statute says the manager proposes the budget, presents it to the board no later than June 15th, which is June 13th, because it's on a Friday. And then it has to be sent to the governmental bodies 60 days prior to the public hearing. That's going to be set. The public hearing is currently
So
set
what's the
for
magic day?
August 21st. Right now, we're thinking that it would be June 20th to be on the safe side.
So
So-
next week, we're looking at Tuesday afternoon or Thursday morning.
To be on the safe side would
Well,
be
it's
next
June
week.
20th. That says that we could do it before we meet the next meeting,
No.
June 19th.
Statutory is June 15th, so you have to have it done by next
13th.
We
Friday.
want to be on the safe side, next week is a safer time.
So June 13th is when we need to
That's the
continue.
latest,
At the
yeah.
latest.
June
And
13th.
determine the high
Which is
water. mark.
Friday.
That's correct.
Yes.
And again,
A week Friday.
A week from Friday.
I think what we're trying to do now is the high water mark might be a little too high for us to tolerate. So let's come up with what we think is realistic, either, based on, it could be half of this, half of that, or we could go one way, but we feel like we need to at least do one more due diligence step.
Well, I'd like to have a verification first, that we can't go beyond that 5 years, because I bring the question, Tony, for you. We bid this thing and we budgeted 3.6 million or whatever the number was. There had to be a contingency in there, the bids could come in over, that we would be borrowing not only the bid, but we'd be borrowing not only the original bid, but the contingency or the override.
Max of the contingency.
What's different? The only difference is it's just a bigger number.
What I need to check with Pedro is, number one, what the amount was validated, the maximum amount. And then we have the amount that the actually issued the bond series and certain dollar amount, and what was, and peg down the projects under those
Can't we
bonds.
shuffle them? We've already done that. We've shuffled money from one project to another that we said we weren't going to do.
No, it's
Why can't we do that with
we have a
this?
certain amount of latitude.
We
Now,
need that answer,
yeah, well, that's something we'll talk with Pedro about.
because 5 years on the bond, while that was just better than nothing, that's still gonna be a salty number.
Well, you can always borrow 5 years, do another validation, take that out.
Which is
If
what
we
we
have
had.
to.
Which
So what
is,
you-
We basically would walk in 5-year increments.
We've done that before, the district has had short-term borrowing with the lending institution, and then
So
engage in a validation and take that out longer term.
who's gonna chase this question to whether we can go the 20 years?
I am,
Pedro and Chelsea and me, yes.
yes.
And Stephen, we volunteer Stephen also. Right, Stephen?
Volunteers for me.
Is he still there?
Steven?
Hey, Laura.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, anything that we've said here that you see a vulnerability, anything.
No, nothing. But I do want to reiterate exactly what Chelsea said and a couple others. If the money is in a bond account for a project, that interest's got to follow that project until, we have a bond document that says otherwise.
We don't have a problem with that. With the large value and the share that building and park is, that's our safety net.
So,
We've
and
got plenty to pay for that.
so I understand what you're looking for is on this table that Laura has up here, is that interest earnings would basically clear out the Series 2023 debt service fund lines, because that would pay the P&I, and we would not assess P&I for next year to our residents,
That's all right.
or as
Yeah, but
long as we
we're
can
looking-
stretch,
That's what we have.
as far as we can stretch it.
What we're looking for is a new, nice, pink chartreuse column, replacing that green with different numbers.
A fashionista.
Like 8, 7, 6, and 5 aren't the numbers I'm thinking.
Chelsea, to say what you just said again, looking at.
So
We're talking
what's-
the 2023 debt?
Yep, so what, from my understanding, is we have, let's just say we have $900,000 in interest earnings from the bond. Instead of using that money, we use it to pay the debt P&I payment for next year. So that in essence would drop those numbers in that column to zero.
So then we'd have this same problem a year from now, unless we again have those earnings available to us. So it's a one-time Band-Aid for 1 year.
But you can calculate pretty easy, Bob, once you get an idea of what this is and whether this is a 5-year or 20-year bond, you can have a pretty good idea of what that amortization is going to be on a yearly basis. And then how fast that $2 or $3 billion is going to deplete. You can do that real
Okay,
fast.
okay.
But there's a big difference between it being a 5-year versus a 20-year schedule. It'll really go fast if it's 5 years.
Well, and if you choose, my suggestion, if you choose to go down the path of a bond series, we took out a 5-year loan on the enterprise fund for this building. Why would we not look at a similar bond series for the enterprise fund and do it over 20 years? So, something to
And
contemplate.
it's a much easier validation process because we're using the rates, fees, and charges from the enterprise fund.
Just bring those options back. I mean,
Okay, so you're looking at next Friday, the 13th.
No, ma'am. We're looking at Thursday
Because of the 12th.
Thursday morning,
On the 12th,
Yes,
yes.
what time?
You tell me.
I'm here at 7:30.
9.
Thursday the 12th. Yeah,
Is Thursday the 12th at 9 a.m.
yeah, that works.
work?
Put it
So
on the 7:30, everybody mind getting up early?
you do?
You want to take my kids to
I'm
school?
here at 7:30.
I'll give the day off.
I will on the way up here.
Actually, they will be out of
Would we
school.
say?
That-
Well, I don't have my calendar, but I don't know what's going on, but
9 AM?
I usually have things at 9 and 10, there's things over at television.
On
We have a
Thursday.
president's meeting next week, you know?
No,
Okay, then
no,
I'm good.
they took June off.
9 AM,
Remember
okay.
June, July, August, they have one.
Okay, so at your 3 o'clock session, we will not convene. We will continue to next Thursday, June 12th at 9 AM.
That should only be like about an hour meeting, correct?
I hope so.
I hope so.
All right.
What?
In Thursday, you're.
Okay, and you're
Did you
gonna
play on
have it
Thursday
in,
With the boys?
you're gonna have these options available so we could vote at that time on the high water mark. That's the
Correct.
purpose.
Yes.
That's the drop dead day to do
Yes.
that, yeah.
So
We're gonna
what,
publish it.
Well, no, the drop dead date is on the 20th.
No, it's the 13th. It has to be done by the 15th of June. We have to
Which
have
is
it
Sunday.
published by the 20th.
Well, the statute says the manager has to provide a budget to the board by the 15th. And then we conduct a public hearing and then you transmit the proposed approved budget for purposes of the adoption hearing to local governments, not less than 60 days prior to the budget hearing. But out of abundance of caution, I suggest that this all take place next Thursday.
Thursday, I'll
So we
be
don't
there.
bump up against any other time frame.
Well,
12,
Thursday the
Thursday the
12th.
12th,
The 12th.
9 o'clock.
so
We
there,
can do that.
Here,
yes. So what we'll do at the 3 o'clock session, when we go back into budget discussions, we do have some other issues that we will need answered from you, like Town Lakes.
I have a list.
And Stony Brook.
Okay.
That those two, depending on your answer, we will have to go back and make those adjustments, which is why we suggested the continuation of the meeting, so.
But those are all negative, aren't they? They're all negative issues. They're not increasing issues.
Depends on the decision you make.
Depends on where your property is.
Well, the key is the quickest you can get these answers and get the calculations back. I don't want to really come in here at 9 o'clock next Thursday morning
Look at it.
and find out that 1870 is 1865.
We'll do our best, at least by next Wednesday.
Right.
Laura's out Friday and Monday, but we'll work with
Our
Stephen
guard.
Bloom and get it done.
So you think we'll see it on Wednesday, the 11th,
Yes, ma'am.
before the 12th?
A whole day
A
before.
whole day.
A whole day before.
We're gonna do our best to try-
You-
I was looking for a Monday, but
You could
okay.
get your estate affairs taken care of.
I guess.
Do you wanna,
Okay.
Take a 5
I'll be here.
it's time to publish Ed's address.
Okay, right.
Oh, no, but
Okay, so we're good and we'll take a 5-minute recess.
Okay, I'm gonna mute us.